All right, back for another beer review, and today I'm going to be reviewing yet another beer from the Fifth Frame Brewing Company, and they are out of Rochester, New York, and this is their Thrift Store Recliner. So they are calling this one a Petite Pastry Stout. What does that mean? I have no idea. I'd imagine it's an American Stout that is brewed with adjuncts, comes in at 7% alcohol by volume. No IBUs listed in the time of review. This beer is about 2.5 months old. So I mentioned this before about Fifth Frame, but they have a tendency to not release really any information about the beers that they release. Usually just like a single sentence. That's all they have. For this one on their website, they said something like sludgy, fudgy, chocolaty, and they called it a petite pastry stout. They said like liquid brownie batter is what they said, but they didn't say if they're using adjuncts. If they're calling it a pastry stout, I'd imagine maybe there's vanilla beans in here, cocoa nibs, maybe some lactose, although I'd imagine they would have called it a milk stout. I have no idea. But it sounds pretty interesting because most pastry stouts that I've had usually are imperial stouts. But anyway, let's give this a pour into #proper glassware. Now, they always fill these right to the brim. So usually when I crack them open, beer goes everywhere. I'd imagine it's going to be the same case here. Hopefully not. We'll see. I always try to be extra careful. And of course, you probably won't see it, but there's a little bit there and there's a little bit here. And then I made it worse. Fantastic. Anyway, let's pour this into the glass. About like that. So, petite pastry stout. Yeah, sure, why not? That has about, well, it's very deep and dark actually. For a 7% stout, it's very, it's almost pitch black. I'd say more of a darker brown. The head itself is about a finger and a half of a very creamy looking, straight up brown head. Some bigger bubbles, some smaller bubbles. It looks extremely creamy. Let's get a nose. Doesn't have a lot of aromatics, honestly. Now, this has been out of the fridge for about 45 minutes, so you're probably looking at like 55, 60 degree range. Yeah, actually I'm getting slight metallic nose. Might be an indication of that there's lactose in here. Usually I get that in milk stouts. Definitely a roasted malt character. There's not, they say it's a pastry stout, petite pastry stout. Not really getting chocolate or vanilla. You know, no other adjuncts that I can think of my top of my head, like, you know, coffee or, you know, any kind of nut like a hazelnut or anything. It's just pretty much roasted malts along with a little bit of like a metallic vibe, which I think is coming from potentially lactose. The nose is very average, so to speak. And if somebody knows that something's average, it'd be this guy. Anyway, let's get into it. Cheers, everyone. Body and mouthfeel are really nice. It has a nice softness, slight creaminess to the mouthfeel. Really, that's great. It's a little bit undercarbonated. I don't think the body is thin for 7%. This is like medium, slightly higher side of medium, so it's appropriate. So it's one of the few stouts or porters that I've had recently that isn't thin. Right, Paul? I want to say they're using lactose in it. I got the metallic nose that I usually get from lactose in most milk stouts. And in the taste, there is a little bit of like a vanilla kick here. It's not big whatsoever, but it definitely has a vanilla vibe to the taste. So right up front, you're hit with those roasted malts, a decent amount of chocolate. I couldn't tell you if they use cocoa nibs or some kind of chocolate in this, but I wouldn't be surprised. But it has like a sweeter dark chocolate in the taste as it carries through the palate. Halfway through, there is a slight bitterness that comes on. It's almost slightly astringent too. It's weird. The finish is relatively sweet, semi-dry finish. Not much bitterness to speak of. Like I said, halfway through the palate, a little bit of astringent bitterness, but it really finishes on the sweeter side of things. And yeah, that's about it. Like I said, a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of chocolate in here, some roasted malts. The body and mouthfeel are spectacular for the beer itself, but the taste is just, it's solid. It's okay. Yeah, I mean, if you're going for, I guess, a sessionable pastry stout, they call it a petite pastry stout. I can see where they're coming from and what they're going for. But for me, I don't think they reached their goal. Maybe they did. Maybe they really love this beer, and if so, kudos to them. For me, myself, I like the body. I like the mouthfeel. They're both appropriate. Actually, the mouthfeel is great. But the taste for me is a little bit of a letdown. And when you're saying petite pastry stout, you know, they mentioned liquid brownie batter. Not really for me. It's just a little bit of chocolate, a little bit of vanilla, roasted malts. And that's about it. It's not a bad beer. It's just, for me, something that isn't really wowing me. That said, I'm going to give this because of the body mouthfeel, I'm going to give this a 3.5 out of 5. Without that, this would honestly be for me like a 3 out of 5, 3.25 out of 5. Again, not that ratings matter, but just to show you how much that body and mouthfeel actually helped this one for me in terms of drinkability. Yeah, so Thrift Store Recliner from the Fifth Frame Brewing Company, a very low 3.5 out of 5. Probably my least enjoyable beer from them to date. I don't know. I would like to see this kicked up to like the 9-10% range and get kind of crazy if they're using a bunch of adjuncts, just because I don't think so-called petite pastry stouts will work all that well. Anyway, appreciate you guys stopping by for another review. Until the next one, cheers.